Welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto with Full Curl Precision. For those who haven't subscribed yet, please do. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. Help me get there. We're a small channel here. We're just trying to make it grow. We do some funny dad jokes, a little bit of dark humor, but educational stuff when it comes to hunting, cartridges, rifles. We talk about a little bit of everything here. But mainly, we talk about different cartridges, what they've done, what they're capable of, some of the new stuff, some of the old stuff. And so on this series we've been doing is cartridges of historical cartridges, why some aren't as popular as they should be, and why they are, I don't know. Well, in this one, it's kind of the caveat. I actually kind of do know why this one isn't as popular as it should be. But it should be more popular than it is. So for tonight, we're going to go into what was essentially the first belted Magnum. Okay? Well, at least it's the first one that Winchester ever messed with. And what is it? The 264. The 264 Win Mag. One of the oldest Magnums to ever be invented. Talk about a flat shooting cartridge. Now, it didn't have heavy bullets. It is a 26 caliber. If you prefer 6.5, whatever, it is a 6.5 millimeter. It is a .264 caliber. So the 264, it was indeed used the parent casing of the 375 H&H to make this cartridge. Now, I didn't have very heavy bullets. A heavy bullet for that cartridge at the time was 140 grain. And really, at the time era in which it was made, bullets had flat bases, round nose, soft points. They weren't very aerodynamic. And the only way to get more aerodynamic was to just simply shrink your caliber. They didn't think about too much in terms of spire points. There were some, but they weren't as common. Spire was still kind of being invented and kind of gaining some momentum. It wasn't really that popular yet. The 264 was a great cartridge for medium game out to distances of 400 yards. That which was absolutely phenomenal for back in the day. You know, hunting back then when this was initially invented, man, if you get a shot at 200 yards, that was a long distance. Most people back then, they got within 100, 120 yards or better. So hunting was a lot different then. And so the bullets kind of reflected that design. Now this has a max case overall length of 3.34, which is a standard length cartridge, right? So you had Magnum length, which goes out to 3.60. Standard is 3.34. And short action is at the 2.99. But most sit within even less of that. So this, being the first belted Magnum, was a big deal. So, like again, programs I use several reloading manuals, but the main program I use is Gordon's reloading tool. So, keeping to the pressure maximums of what this cartridge was doing, 62,366 psi. It was common that this cartridge was put in a 26-inch barrel, so that's what we're going to stick with. And because it's so overbore, and yes, that is overbore. Overbore meaning the proportion of powder to the size of your bore diameter. And so this was considered overbore, meaning you needed a large volume of slow burning powder in order to achieve it without detonating your rifle. So that was one of the biggest challenges. Most bullet weights in this were like 100 to 140 grains. They were lightweight. And so with it, I went with a heavier bullet that you'd find today, but would be more common back then because, again, not higher BC, was that of the Remington pointed soft point core locked. And the BC back then, like 0.385. And for back in the day, that was a pretty good BC. That was considered high BC for then. It isn't now, but that was pretty good for back in the day. And I'm using H1000, so Hodgdon H1000, which is a common powder today. It's been around a long while, and it's kind of similar to what was available even for back then. And with that, I was able to come up with some numbers, and reaching right around close to max line, you're looking at about 3,170 feet per second, give or take a little bit, is what you could push a 140 grain bullet at. Which is, don't get me wrong, it's not slow by any stretch of the imagination. It's not that fast, but it's not like super fast, but it's also not slow. That's actually a really good velocity, which would make for a very flat cartridge. Where this kind of lost its popularity is not because it wasn't a good cartridge or accurate, but once it got into the hands of elk hunters, they started noticing that they weren't getting the kills that they were once previously getting when they were using larger bore cartridges. Even the 30-06 at that time was actually a much more successful much more successful cartridge on elk than this was. Why? Bore diameter. The bore diameter was significantly higher. Inside 200 yards, the 30-06 with a 180 grain bullet was putting elk down way faster than this was. It's just bullet diameter, and that's the way it was going. So this wasn't really proving itself that great in the elk woods. It wasn't doing all that fantastic. And then a few years after this came out, one of the most popular cartridges to date is still on the market. Remington came out with the 7mm Rem Mag. Yeah, and everyone's heard of that, right? The reason why that ended up taking off was because not only could the 7 Rem Mag, achieve the velocities with the lighter bullets that this could, but it had having a higher diameter meant a better wound channel on elk. And then the other thing is it was getting, that 3,100 to 3,200 feet per second with slightly heavier bullets, right? So the hand loaders were achieving those kinds of velocities with 150 to 160 grain bullets. So you're having heavier bullets going the same velocity with a bigger bore. And then once they started hunting elk with those and seeing how much faster they were going down compared to the 264 Win Mag, what do you think happened? Well, the obvious. If you're an elk hunter and one cartridge is doing a better job of putting that animal down faster than the other, are you going to stick with the one that's slower on the kill? No, I don't know anyone that would. So people started either whether they rebarreled the 264s that they had or they got rid of their 264s and they went to a 7 Rem Mag. That's what started happening. And then eventually came out the 300 Win Mag. So even bigger, right? And guess what? That really put the nail in the coffin for the 264. Because once that 30 caliber big cartridge came out and was really putting a hurt on the elk population, not so much putting a hurt on the elk population, but the ones that did get hunted and got shot, they went down even faster than the 7 Rem Mag was. But the 7 Rem Mag hit this sweet spot of kind of the lighter recoil of the 264 and the good performance of the 300. And the fact is, that's where it started shining, because the 7 Rem Mag is a more well-balanced cartridge than the 264, and even a better well-rounded cartridge than the 300. The 300 really shines in the elk woods when it comes to your larger game. The 264 was really just a fast, flat-shooting, medium game cartridge, much like the 257 Weatherby. The 257 Weatherby, fantastic cartridge. But honestly, if you talk to the guys who really hunt with the 257 Weatherby, you don't hear a lot of them going after elk or moose with it. Why? Because they didn't feel that it was doing the same type of job as a 300 Weatherby. So the guys who were really hunting larger game were focused on that. And so they tended to shy away from those smaller calibers. It's not that much different than the story you're seeing today. There are a lot of guys who really like their 6.5 Creedmoors and their 6.5 PRCs. But after a lot of the hype has kind of cleared out a little bit, we started noticing some patterns. A lot of guys were going back to their 270s, their 30-06s, and going back to their 7 Rem mags. So if you ask a hunting guide, well, which would they prefer for taking on elk when it comes to their customers, a 7 Rem mag or a 6.5 PRC, they're going to select it. It's preferable a 7 Rem mag or a 300 Win mag over the 6.5 PRC. Now, obviously, they always say choose what's going to shoot, which you shoot the best, because that is the most important. However, Elmer Keefe spoke about shooting the largest cartridge you can comfortably manage. And oftentimes, that is something like a 7 Rem mag. And so a lot of guys who could shoot the 264 Win mag comfortably and accurately found that they could equally do the same when it came to the 7 Rem mag. And they were getting faster kills than they were with the 264. That's what really pushed the 264 back. Now, if the 264 was offered with a beltless offering and modern shouldering and modern tolerances, would it do better today? Yeah. But here's the thing. Weatherby already came out with something like that. That is the 6.5 Weatherby RPM. So that question has already been answered. That said, the only reason the 6.5 Weatherby RPM is also kind of in the same boat as the 264 Win Mag is Weatherby doesn't have many offerings. You can't find any 6.5 Weatherby RPM rifles outside of Weatherby. So you're kind of limited to what you can get. And the ammo is kind of expensive. And that's kind of where that ended up lying in there. So the real answer as to why the 264 Winchester would never stayed as popular as it initially started had to do with the introduction of the 7 Rem mag and the 300 Win mag. Those two put the nails in the coffin. Now, can you still find the 264 Win mag? Yes, you can. There are a few companies that still chamber in it if you want, and you can still find some ammunition for it. It is a good cartridge. But if you're going to plan on trying to use it on game much larger than, let's say, mule deer, you're going to find that it struggles in comparison to the 7 Rem mag and the 300 Win mag when it comes to your wound channels and its ability to put down that game faster. So I appreciate for those who follow, and I appreciate for those who are liking and they're subscribing. Please keep doing this. If you find that there's a cartridge that is a semi-spec cartridge that a lot of people don't talk about, by all means put it on here. I'll do my research. But that's what I found on this. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again.